I am Jim Collison. I'm here with Kathy Deweese. We're here on LinkedIn Live. Thanks for joining us today and being a part of it. A couple instructions before we get going. One, we'd love you to put your top five in the chat room if you have that. If you have that available, you can just type that in and put them in the chat. We'll be highlighting them as we go along here today. And we kind of have a question for you. In what strength do you lean into or lean on when you're with your friends? How do you deploy your themes? And we'll be talking about that here and about having strengths conversation with friends. Kathy, let's get to know you a little bit. And you're my friend, which is
I know.
awesome, by the way. So
That is awesome.
thanks for coming out today. Tell us a little bit about what you do at Gallup.
You bet. Jim, thanks for having me. I was getting ready this morning and I was thinking, this is going to be so fun. I'm talking to my friend about friends and strengths. So, what better way to start a Monday after a
Yeah,
holiday? How
pretty
about
great.
that?
Pretty great.
Let's see. I'm in the office today. I work out of Omaha. That's our corporate office. And I am proud to say, you guys, I've been at Gallup for 30 years. And I've been doing coaching a long time, over 20 years. So, I primarily coach coaches and I coach leaders and executives. And I spend a lot of time in either teaching, coaching, or working with coaches or coaching other people. So I feel really blessed that I get to spend my time doing something I love to do. So welcome everyone, wherever you're calling in from or listening in from.
Sounds like a pretty great role. Do you have a friend in like a best friend at work in what you do for Gallup? In other words, someone that you can spend time with who does a job similar to yours that you would consider a friend?
That is a great question. Yes, I have several actually that I think of right now. As soon as you said that question, I thought to myself, there's like five little faces that popped up into my
Mm,
into my brain. So yes, and that is I think another that's a really powerful thing to be able to share what you do every day, also your passion and your mission with people who you can call a friend because
yeah.
it's different than an acquaintance. So.
We have folks checking in. They're letting us know where they're listening from, which is awesome. Also, put your top five in chat. We'd love to see that as well. We'll be showing those on screen as we go forward. And then we kind of have a question of what, with your friends, which of your top five or a couple that do you lean into in your friendships? Kathy, for you and those friends that you have at work that do the same job as you,
Mhm.
what do you think the value of that or what? Let me ask you this: what do those strengths conversations look like because you're friends?
Mhm.
So as you're having those conversations, is it at any different level because you're already friends and
Jim,
strengths?
what were we talking about pre-show?
Yeah,
You and I are friends. And we were talking about how we spent our weekend, our nice holiday weekend.
yeah,
And so it is natural, isn't it? It just comes out. It's just and the other thing is that you and I share some similar strengths. And that's what we were kind of bopping back and forth because you were kind of sharing your story and I thought, I have a ranger maximizer too, but you have higher activator. So it's just kind of a natural, it's like breathing, right? We
yeah.
appreciate each other, we like each other. I think I lost your question, but I was just thinking, as a friend, I think it just kind of comes out naturally, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you and I work at Gallup, so we have our Clifton Strengths, or if you've taken the assessment, you'll have the assessment. But my hunch is, like most of us, if you read your friend's assessment and you read their report, those there's not many surprises there because if they're your friend, you know that person, you like that person, you love them in your life in some way, shape, or form. And so you've seen those behavior patterns coming out throughout your relationship with them. And so
Hmm.
maybe you didn't have the exact name, or maybe you didn't have them all, and nobody's a mind reader, you can't. But my hunch is that there were probably several on there in their top 5, their top 10 that you looked at that and you thought, you betcha. And that's why we're friends, or
Yeah.
that's what I need from you, or I see it every day, every time we talk, something like that. I mean, these are our natural patterns. They're just coming out.
As I
Yeah.
get an opportunity to work with college students around strengths, we often talk about that strengths is a framework to help people, and I think help teams. It becomes an accelerant for teamwork. In other words, when we know everybody's top five and we're thinking about them often, we're able to do more faster that way. We're able to do more work, right? That we're able to do more things because we don't have to spend a bunch of time figuring each other out.
Mm.
How does that? What do you think? Does that look any different with friendships? In other words, if I'm just hanging out with my friends on the weekend or out by the lake, does that change anything, or is there anything different about that if I know their strengths?
I think you go deeper faster,
Yeah.
just like you would in a coaching session, just like you would anywhere. Um, and you know what else it is? When you think about why are we friends with a person? What is it about that person? What is it that's conscious or unconscious? Something that's at the surface or below the surface that you just get drawn to that person for? There's something there. And
Hmm.
so when you think about adding the strengths component to it, it's a natural accelerant to the relationship building, but I think it's a deepening agent. I
Mm.
think it helps you, and I also think it's an like almost an appreciation agent. Like it allows you to really put a name to something. I think about my best friend, and she does happen to lead with woo. She's a connector. She happens to be my cousin. I grew up with her, so we grew up our whole lives together. But I don't have very high woo, but I have high relator. And if I think about our relationship over the years, went to the same high school, went to the same, college, and things like that. She's a connector. She's more of that kind of more that let's get out and broaden our network, and then together, we would you know throw some pretty good parties, we would have some pretty
Mhm.
good dinners, we would do things like that because together we kind of partnered together. But I didn't always know her strengths, and yet when I read her strengths finder report, I thought to myself, of
Mhm.
course that's you.
Mhm.
I mean, that's some of the things that I love about her and that I've always appreciated about her, and that is probably makes us a good partnership in a lot of things. So I think it's a deepening agent as well, an appreciation agent. So I think it also, when you think about, like you said, hanging out at the lake or just hanging out at dinner or whatever,
Mhm.
um, it allows you to, one of the values of Clifton Strengths is assume positive intent. It's one of our
Mm.
guiding principles. It's a value. And so when you think about, we naturally do things like that with our friends anyway, right? That's why they're our friends. We don't get on the defensive. We don't assume that they're attacking us if they have a question or anything like that. So if we think about assuming positive intent from the strengths perspective, it deepens that, doesn't
Mhm.
it? It makes
Mhm.
us go into that, looking at that behavior pattern going, oh, like I had my reaction with my friend. Of course that's you. Or if we are on the receiving end of some of their behaviors, it's like assuming that positive intent. It's like, "Oh, I love that about you." And
Mm.
of course that's where that's coming from. So,
That's
yeah,
so great. My daughter, you'd think it'd be me, but in our house, my daughter forced everybody in the family to take Clifton Strengths. She wanted to know
I love that.
everybody's top 5, and what is family but friends, right? I mean, they're friends on
That's right.
purpose. And so
That's right.
it's funny, we spend a lot of times, thinking about it and talking about it. We help a lot of managers with questions when they're thinking about going from boss to coach.
Mm.
We have some questions we give them. Well, in friendships, let's think about some great opening
Yeah.
questions that friends can ask one another. What are some go-to questions that we could use, do you think, that may open up the conversations, not
Yeah.
just water cooler
Right.
conversations, but something that's strengths related?
Yeah. And I always think about a question. Let's think about a question. If you think about, I'm a coach, so a coach uses questions. It's a tool, it's a technique, but I think about it as a gift. If I ask a good question, that's a gift to my client. So I think about that in the same way as a friendship. A good question with my friend could be a gift to my friend. And what can that gift give them? It's almost like you can think about it's like, what gifts can I give my friends today? So
Mhm.
ask a good question. So, one of the things I think about, and I learned this from a mentor coach a long time ago, but it's a question that many of us probably just kind of take for granted. It's just kind of a throwaway. But how are you?
Mhm.
Okay, how many times have you asked somebody that? You might even be walking by them and how are you? Just kind of walk by. Think about what you're asking. How are you? And when you start a conversation with your friends, most of us probably start our conversations like that, right? Over text or an email. Hey, how's it going? How are you? Ignore nothing. Your friend is in your life for a reason. How are you? And really stop and listen.
Mm.
Ignore nothing. Don't ignore their tone, don't ignore their emotions, don't ignore their words, don't ignore that pause or the sigh. It doesn't have to be a negative, it could be a positive, but ignore nothing. And one of the things, Jim, that we think about, and this is probably something I bet all of you have in some way, shape, or form heard this before, but in coaching, we talk about the 3 levels of listening. And if you've used it, I think some people have used it in many different ways. I work with educators, I work with all kinds of folks who have heard like about the 3 levels of listening. But if we think about the how are you, And then you really stop and listen. That first level is really about listening. It's kind of our focus. It's like internal. It's like the talker's focus, or the listener's focus. So it's internal listening. The focus is on me. So how are you? I can ask that just as a flyaway and be like, oh, okay, whatever. And then I have something I really want to say. So I don't really listen to what they said. Right? It's like, oh yeah, okay, that's great. But here's what I need from you. Here's what I need your help with. But now if you get into level 2, that's more the listener's attention is fully on the speaker. So if you think about that, it's that listening to understand.
Mhm.
It's true focus on the other person. What a gift is that, of true focus on another person. And you
Is
don't
there
have to be face to face.
when we think about this, actually listening for understanding as
Mhm,
opposed to listening for response, are there any tricks? For some of us, our attention spans are a little short.
mhm.
Any advice on that, as far as give me some advice on how can I change from listening from response to listening for understanding? Are there things I could be doing, or tricks I could be doing to kind of help me with that?
I think it's about a quick little reminder of, why am I talking to this person? Why are they in front of me? Or a quick reminder of, how about just remember what you like about them? I think it's just about values too. It's just about, maybe the whole question is about being in presence with another person, mindfulness. We all can be distracted. I was thinking about these levels of listening. By the way, the third level is that listener is completely aware of all the cues and the stimulus that's involved. So it's really that tuned in, attentive, empathetic. I call it holistic. It's focus on the holistic. I think it's all using all your senses. But to your point about staying, we all bounce between those 3 levels throughout. And so the trick is to catch yourself when you're at level 1, and to give yourself that trick, or that prompt, of that mental prompt, to say, whatever it could be. For you, it could be a word, it could just be focus. For another person, it could be a physical, it could be take a deep breath. For another person, it could just be remember something about that person that you like. But it's really about staying in presence. It's something that we can practice. You talked about your family being friends. Think about how many of us are in the kitchen, maybe tonight,
Mhm.
making dinner. I don't know. Maybe you're warming up leftovers. I don't know what you're doing, but you're in the kitchen, and you've got one of your family members walks in, and you're stirring something, and they say, "Hey, mom, you know what happened to me at school today?" I've got a choice in that moment. I can continue to stir, or put something in the microwave, or do whatever I was doing on the counter. Or what can I do? I can stop, and I can take a moment and be fully present for just a moment. Hey, mom, this is what happened to me at school today. Or my husband walks in the door. Does he say hi? Does he take a deep breath? Does he take
Mhm.
off his coat? Stay present just for a
Mhm.
moment and just observe. Get out of your own head. Stay present with that other person just for a moment. We like these people. We love these people. Let's not forget it.
Allegedly, allegedly.
Allegedly. So how about we show it?
Kathy, it's a great conversation, in the sense that, and I need those reminders. I almost need
I
to
do too.
invoke some maximizer or something inside of me to slow down for a second and say, "Hey, wait a minute, maybe there's more to this." We do want to take some questions from those listening in
Yeah.
chat, and if you do me a favor, put a Q in front of that so we can see those. George had been asking a little bit earlier in the conversation, how about friends who don't know Clifton Strengths? So, Kathy, as we think about, say you've got your
Yep.
best friend, they've never taken Clifton Strengths. What kind
Right.
of things can you do to still have strengths-based
Yeah.
conversations that
George, how are you? It's not a strengths-based conversation. It's a caring question, but if you care about the person, you value them. Here's another question. What's going well for you today?
Mhm.
Now, by the way, this is not a script. Some of the questions that I'm giving you, it's not in order of, it's not a script. So it's more of just thinking about, weaving these in. What's going well for you today? We don't have to know their strengths to have them share a success with us, or tell us about something that went well. We don't have to. And we just want to keep it simple, right? If they have their Clifton strengths, I think it's a little weird to kind of always just talk strengths, or kind of use the strength spotting words and that kind of stuff. So just be natural. These are your friends. But if you can weave in a question in your conversation with that person of, what's going well for you?
Mhm.
What went well for you today? or what worked in that situation, or what went well in that situation, or whatever. Get them to name a success. We're never as strong as when we have our successes clearly in mind. Thank you,
Mhm.
Dr. Clifton.
Mhm.
That is something we don't have to have the Clifton Strengths top 10 to kind of keep top of mind. And another question might be, so as a follow-up to what's going well, now this is kind of a strengths question, George, I guess, but it's, you can get them to name, how did your strengths play a role in that? Which one, how did you want to use that more? How did it get in your way? Um, Sometimes if you just look at the behaviors of your friends and just describe that behavior.
Mm.
She's kind. He's compassionate. He's dependable. He always picks up the phone when I call. Think about what you notice in that person. He's funny. She asks good questions. She's a good listener. I don't have to know a person's Clifton Strengths results to be able to describe their characteristics and behaviors that I appreciate about them. I don't know. Does that help? What do you think, Jim?
Yeah, I think, in our book, Strengths-Based Parenting, there's a chapter on strength spotting. And it's really designed for adults to be spotting these strengths in children pre them able to answer these questions.
That's right.
But I think the question among friends, I love yours. What was successful for you today, or what went well for you today? I love those questions. I love the follow up of why. Like they say, "Oh, I did blah blah blah," or this or this. To follow up with why, or why was that important, or why was it, why was it successful? And
How was it or a
y
what? Yeah.
yeah, something
Mhm.
to dig in a little bit, to start saying, "Okay, let's deconstruct that success and
Mhm.
figure out," and by the way, this doesn't have to, this, you can use this question if you know your strengths as well. So,
Yeah.
George, I think this works either way, but you can begin to get to the motivations, or get to the success factors, or get to the, and ask some real questions. I don't know anybody who doesn't necessarily like to talk about themselves in that way. If you start opening it up, they'll say, generally they'll say more and more about that. And you get this great conversation. I think from that you can start to you can start to construct then some ideas of, oh, well, you might be good at this, or there's maybe some things that you can use here. And so let that conversation, you talked about these 3 levels.
Mhm.
I think the understanding part, can go so deep in figuring out what they're saying and why they're saying it and what's in those conversations. So, Kathy, that's kind of what I think of. Marina reminds me that she says, "I love the five clues to talent when I don't know someone's Clifton
Yeah.
strengths." Right, in this ability to, I can't rattle those. Can you rattle those off the top of
Yearning.
your head?
Yeah, yearning. Wow, okay, so help us. Hello. I should have those memorized. Yearning, flow. Hello, somebody'll hit it. Come on, guys. Um, what you're naturally drawn to, what comes easy, what you learn quickly.
You're right.
Hello.
Well,
Anyway,
I put you on
it's
the
not a
spot.
quiz. Thanks.
Yeah, I put you on the spot. It's that intention though of what in us is working right. I told you this weekend I had a super productive weekend in the pre-show. You and I were talking, and you allowed me to tell you what the weekend was like. Like you asked a question of, well, you, in fact, you came in. I was telling Riley about it, and you jumped in and you said, "Well, wait a minute, I want to hear about it." So, so you allowed me to say that sometimes we jump into the middle of these conversations. You're like, "Oh, well, that wasn't for me. I just want to tell my stories." Right. And so there's some opportunity to kind of listen to especially when you sense the significance in it, right? And the words, kind of in the words are saying.
You know what it
What
is, Jim? It's
Yeah,
like,
go ahead.
let's not take the people closest to us for granted. There's
Mm,
always something to learn,
yeah.
even about somebody you've known your whole life or that you've been married to for 25 years. There's always something to learn. There's always something to appreciate. So maybe that's one of our hints to ourselves is, how do I not take this person for granted? And especially now, if we kind of tie it to strengths, thank you. I knew our friends would hit us with with the other clues to talent. Thank you so much. But if you think about not taking someone for granted, sometimes here's a little. I've been thinking about writing a blog on this, so maybe you guys have just given me the I don't know impetus to do it. But what's the antidote to the poison?
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about personal relationships, it can be any kind of personal relationship. It could be a friendship, a spouse, a love relationship, any kind of relationship. You think about sometimes there's poison, and poison typically is not a big dose that you dunk and and now you're done. Typically, poison in these relationships is a drip, drip, drip. And what's the poison? It's when we don't assume positive intent, when we don't assume, when we don't try to continue to learn and like and learn more about this person, when we let those little things that bug us about the people that we know the most get under our skin and start to kind of poison the way we look at that person. And so if we think about what's the antidote, think of one thing that you like about them.
Mm-hmm.
Think about one thing that you appreciate about them. If you know their strengths, sometimes you just name the strength in your head. It's an antidote. And we've all heard maybe we haven't, but there's that research that talks about for every negative, you take 5 positives to kind of just counteract it and neutralize it. I think naming strengths, I think it's an accelerant. I think it helps to neutralize the poison a little faster. And again, George, I'm thinking back, even if your friends haven't taken Clifton Strengths, she is so fun to be around.
Mm-hmm.
He is a great cook.
Yeah.
We don't
Yeah.
have to just neutralize that poison. Think of something that you appreciate, that you like, that you admire, that you value.
I think, Kathy, you're hitting it right on the head here with this. Oftentimes, if we're trying to discover something about somebody in a conversation, if we're asking the why question, and then we're listening because we want to spot a theme, we want to spot something in them, we listen a lot more carefully. Like because we're trying to do something with that. And so I think, whether you know it or not, I think there's some opportunities in friendships to ask these questions and then listen for the answers so that you can spot it. Maybe that's I'm answering my own question of how do I do this when I don't like. Well, I want to discover things. I love that. That's why I love interviewing people, is I love listening to their answers and digging these things out. And so I think sometimes, it's funny, I don't interview people like I do when we're doing it this way, just as friends. Maybe I ought to start. Maybe I ought to start doing it more. What about in the relationship that we have? I've always found that this idea of service or serving others is important in this, and I think sometimes we kind of just think, okay, I'm just going to sit there and listen. How else could we engage in a conversation with our friends around strengths when they've identified something? What else could we do?
I think asking some good questions. I think making some observations. I think also affirming. How many times have we, again, maybe it goes back to the idea about taking folks for granted or not shining the light on them, right? Shining the light on something. So I think in a friendship, I would hope that there's trust, right? That's one of the foundational principles of a good friendship. And you think about trust, you think about respect, you think about admiration. When's the last time we've maybe said out loud to that person something that we admire about them, respect about them, appreciate about them? It doesn't take anything to do that. And when you think about, boss to coach, it's a foundational principle about individualizing, managers individualizing to their employees. It's never a better opportunity in a friendship. You know this person. There's a depth of emotion and relatability, and as I've already said, trust and respect and friendship. So take a minute. Just take a minute. You know what it is, Jim? It's really, I think I'm going back to that word mindfulness, and I think I'm also going back to the word intentionality. Just be intentional. Take one moment before you answer their text or get on the phone with them and just be intentional. Here's a bonus question. How can I help? How can I help? When's the last time we've asked our friends that? For some of you, probably an hour ago. Maybe for some of us, not as often as we should. How can I help? what does that allow the person to do? It allows them to think about you through that lens of strengths or through that lens of respect and value. But it also is you're putting yourself out there in that little element of vulnerability. How can I help? And so, what strengths does your friend need from you? And it's that intentional application in the service of someone that we care about. How about that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question that we don't deploy enough, but you shouldn't do every time. Like,
Right.
right?
Because then you can get in. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's like I think we need to save it for those really moments. Again, being at that third level of listening, really when you're fully present and fully mindful and whatever that means, but
Mhm.
you know it when you're there. And then an opportunity arises. And
Mhm.
it's like cuz I've had that happen where people have asked me, "Can I help?" And then I'd say yes. They didn't really mean
Really help.
actually help.
What about this question? What
Yeah.
support do you need?
Ooh, yeah.
That's not just me. That's not how can I help? Just what do they need? I don't know. They get to name it. They get to name it. Maybe there's one. What support do you need?
Um, Eduardo says, reflect back on what you heard a friend say and ask, is there something I missed? Right.
Mhm.
I would think of that often in terms of maybe a miscommunication in there, but maybe like, hey, is we're go anything else, that
What
I
else is
say this.
important for me to know?
Yeah, I say this as an interview question all the time when I'm
Mhm.
interviewing people. Was there any question I should have asked that I didn't? Right? Just and again, that doesn't always work in the context of a friendship, but you kind of maybe there's an opportunity to ask, is there anything that I should know? Anything else I
Mhm.
should know
Mhm.
in light of this,
Mhm.
yeah, is there anything else I should know? I think that's a great I mean, again, this gives us the opportunity to really dig in. Kathy, I also think not every conversation necessarily needs to be a deep dive
Oh,
in
no.
deploying, right? There's
That'd
sometimes
be
we
so
just need
weird, wouldn't it? That's artificial. That's what I was just thinking about. I was like, this is just natural. If we all just really stop and take a step back and just think to ourselves, let's not make this too complicated. Let's find ways to strength spot, ask a few good questions, practice deeper listening, find a way to appreciate. It's not always going to be in the same conversation, but it's just kind of these little things to be more intentional about in our friendships. It makes it better, doesn't it? It's a gift that
yeah.
we can give to our friends.
We started with this conversation or this question when we first started. I want to end with it with you and me personally.
Okay.
What when you are with friends of your top 5, you can bring in others if you want. What do you think you use most often in your friendships, strengths wise?
That's such a great question. I think it's probably a combination of if I think about how I spent my holiday weekend, it was individualization, maximizer, and achiever.
Mm,
It was appreciating the differences around me, and we were doing things together, and we were having fun.
mhm,
But we had a few things we were doing. Whether it was our dinner, at home on Thursday, I hosted a bunch of people. We got together on Friday. I mean, there were all these little things that we were doing, but with my friends and family, I think that's what I was employing. Hey,
mm.
you guys, before we run out of time, I have one more. There's something I read today, and so I do have pretty high connectedness. So I'm just going to throw that out there. And I always feel like when I read one of my devotionals, there's maybe a message for us. So here's the thing I read this morning, and I shared this with Jim pre-show. So our lives change when our habits change. When our I sometimes will say when our thinking changes, we change our behaviors. Our lives change when our habits change.
Mhm.
So I've got a call to action to each one of you. Think of one friend right now. Okay. Get that person in your head. Commit right now to reaching out to them by the end of the day. Ask one of the questions we covered today. Come up with one of your own. I've been watching the chat. Some of you have got brilliant questions. Find a way to celebrate something about your friend today.
Mm.
How about that? Create a new habit.
I like it. We'll close on it. I'll do the homework. I usually connect with Dr. Adam Hickman every Monday morning. That's our tradition that
Okay.
we do. I missed him this morning, so I will get him. I'll get back with him this afternoon, and he is a great friend. And all we do is chat about the weekend. How was your weekend? That is the question. How was your weekend? The beauty of that, Kathy, is we do it so often that we kind of know, we know the rules of engagement. It's one of those check-in like a manager would do. It's more like a check-in conversation, but we know the rules of engagement. A couple reminders before we leave. One, make sure you subscribe. We're here on LinkedIn. Make sure you subscribe and follow whatever the terminology is on LinkedIn. Make sure you do that to our page, the Clifton there on LinkedIn. And then if you just search Clifton Strengths on any of our social platforms, whether that be a Facebook or they're on YouTube or an Instagram, if you search for that, you can find it. We'd love to have you subscribe, follow, do the things to stay close to us. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for being a part of this LinkedIn Live. It's always a blast. Great comments in the chat room as well. Thanks for coming out. We'll see you next time. I think we're up next week, December 8th. Austin's coming back, and we're going to spend a little time talking about Clifton Strengths some more. Join us for that. Take care, everybody.
Awesome.